With the crash of the first boom of the first bomb, we looked at each other, grabbed Casey's hand and said, "Here we go." And that was that. It was scary, it was exciting, but it was what I was born to do.
Working with veterans and being able to get their stories out into the public so that other people can understand from a perspective that's not Hollywood what life is like for them. What's it like going into boot camp? What's it like being part of, a total institution, using Irving Goffman's phrase? What's it like to create this bond of family, this camaraderie with people that goes so deep that you've been taught to put your life on the line for them. Not only for them, but for all Americans in general.
No matter who it is, if they aren't wearing a U.S. military uniform, shoot them. I'm thinking to myself, I came over here to shoot the enemy. I guess the enemy wants our garbage. So I guess that's what I'll do. So for the next 2 hours, I stood watch over the garbage. The mess cooks from inside the building came out, took the trash out there, came back in. I didn't shoot them, but if there's somebody else coming, they're going to get shot.
Hat on, veil covering her eyes, because I could still see her face. I could see the tears rolling down her cheeks, the emotion, her children sitting right next to her, brothers, sisters, family, all sitting behind her. And so, as I took my first step, that moment seemed to last forever.
In Jeeps, driving, using something called blackout drive. And that means that every light in your Jeep is turned off, every light in the guy in front of you's Jeep is turned off, and every light behind you in this big line of vehicles is turned off. Except for 25 yards ahead of you, there's a little teeny tiny red light on the Jeep in front of you, and that's what keeps you from hitting that guy. I wrecked 6 Jeeps.
To keep us free, to keep us safe, and then to come back home. And once you were part of something that was, in essence, larger than you are, to come back and to be an individual in a society that maybe doesn't have that sense of connectedness anymore, how do you then reintegrate back in? And so I really wanted to create the Veterans Voice Project to be able to, one, allow space for veterans to tell their stories in an environment where they could be heard by others. And two, I wanted to be able to bring those stories to the community so that we can understand what it was like and what it is like for our military personnel to come back home, or some of the experiences that they went through, so that we can understand who they are better.
What do you feel like you want others to know about veterans through the Veterans Voice Project?
Humanity. That there's, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. That is, the more that, and it's necessary to try to create understanding by speaking more about PTSD, and it has been talked about more, and that's great. However, I think the other side of that is kind of a negative, is that unfortunately the piece that's lost is that we're people.
Hopefully people will have just maybe a little better understanding of some of the things that veterans go through. There's so many programs and outreaches and things that honor veterans, and I think that's great. But I think a lot of it is just for people to actually hear some of the stories that veterans have of their experiences. Makes it a little more human.
And I just remember the first time that I heard 200 boots hitting the pavement and sounding like one. And I felt something in my gut, and I felt something in my heart, and I was very happy. And from that point on, I think it was already
reflection. Reflection. And ironically, because I do suffer from PTSD, or I'm surviving PTSD, and have had some really majorly traumatic events in my life that I've had to rise above. People talk about trauma and overcoming trauma, and people are at least cursorily familiar with that you have to kind of walk through the fire to get through the fire, and they think that the healing comes from talking about the trauma, and that's a piece of it. What I have recently learned is that the final piece is reintegrating the positive things that happened in your life prior to the trauma, because when you stuff those bad experiences, you stuff a lot of the good as well. But those good, but they're all parts of you. So after you walk through the fire and you heal the trauma, and it gets to where you can tell your story and not cry, right? or at least it doesn't destroy you.
I turned to my dad and said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to serve my country. If I have to die in combat, what a way to go.
Green light, we're going tonight. At that point, we basically just kind of came right up on him, got right behind him.
Just kind of remembering, some of the stuff, thinking of the story and kind of trying to condense it. Just started thinking of all the other shit we got into, on the boat, or and just different scenarios and things that happened on the boat that were, I don't want to say tactically scary, but I mean, just things that happened just over the course of my period in the military, and just remember what great friends I made, and how proud I am of what we did. It was a good time. So I'm proud of that, and I'm happy to tell my story.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was the first annual Veterans Voice Project. Please look for us next year. We're going to do this again. Thank you.